So it is February the 3rd. We are on the eve of the opening of the Beijing Olympic Winter Games. How are we feeling, you guys?
Tired.
Yeah. Surviving.
How many interviews have you done in the last 24 hours?
In the last 24 hours, maybe like 10. And
Mandy?
this week, maybe like 20.
Samantha and I were still messaging at, what was it? You would have been 1 a.m. It was about midnight here. We were messaging about what should we say about really late at night.
I guess this is a good thing. We are getting our message out there, inserting the issue of the Uyghur genocide, of the repression in Tibet, all of it into the Olympic story. And that's the thing with this campaign. I mean, I feel like we've had, even though it's a terrible situation and we shouldn't even be here, these games should not be happening, the genocide games should not be happening, there have been some incredible moments, right? And some real highlights along with the lowlights. What stands out for you as two of the key organizers, activists working on this campaign all this time?
I'd say definitely one of the most recent highlights that we've had, the actions in Athens. So earlier, I think it was in October this year, the Olympic flame was handed from Athens to Beijing. And after much planning and kind of secret behind the scenes conversations, we turned up in Athens pretty much en masse. We had a number of different teams who had all taken part in some trainings and some organizing to be able to stage some fantastic actions. There was one at the Acropolis by a young Tibetan activist, Sela, and Joey, a Hong Konger, and they climbed up some scaffolding on the Acropolis and dropped some Tibetan and Hong Kong flag and shouted slogans, and the media took some fantastic photos. We got a huge amount of coverage of it. Zamrata and I were in the background somewhere. Where were we?
We were, I remember having dinner when all of our colleagues were detained because there was just absolutely nothing else we could do. We showed up to the court in the morning and we were turned away. And the case was postponed for some reason. And I just remember going to dinner and we were talking about the press conference the next day. And then I remember getting, like, midway through dinner, I was panicking because I was like, oh shit, what if tomorrow we get arrested and we don't have a plan in place? And so I immediately contacted the Canadian emergency consular service, and just to let them know, because to that point, until that point, it was all like Tibetans and Hong Kongers that were arrested, and I was the only Uyghur person basically in Greece with all of them. And I told myself, if someone from the World Uyghur Congress, is like getting arrested, I will have multiple questions because of the Chinese pressure. They will for sure pressure much more on someone who's affiliated with the World Uyghur Congress, given the past retaliation that we face in different scenes. So yeah, I just remember discussing with Mandy, and I was like, oh, I guess we didn't really, evaluated all the risks, because I remember that afternoon we went to the hotel and the hotel manager said, we are aware of your actions. The police contacted us.
And which was really interesting, because all we were doing was holding a press conference. We weren't staging any action. We literally legitimately booked a room with a view of the Acropolis. We'd invited media to come. We paid for teas and coffees and snacks for the journalists to have. We spent money kind of making sure that we were having an official press conference, but they were still, the Chinese authorities had still been, so the local authorities had been to question, but also Chinese authorities who were there, who were part of the delegation, had been to the hotel to ask questions and put pressure on the hotel about us being there.
And that's always the amazing part. I remember this from 2008 as well. I mean, you don't realize, we talk about the long arm of China all the time, and we feel it in different ways in our lives or in our activities. Certainly when we have protests and there's someone sketchy standing around the corner, hiding, filming, or whatever, filming us. But it's when you travel and you go to a new place or a new country and you realize security services are there watching you, or people are tailing you, right? Isn't it? I just feel it. I know that those moments, I've had many of them now, and I feel it each time, like, oh, right. Yes. They're onto us, and this is how it works. This is how the Chinese government really has some presence or influence, not everywhere, but a lot of the places that we travel.
Yeah, and the irony was that we were in Greece, the country where democracy was born, and we were there without really thinking that this would happen, and then it happened. And then even like the embassies that we contacted, they couldn't really comprehend the situation, because they kept telling us to that the police could assist, like that we wouldn't be detained for no reason. And then I remember being frustrated. I was like, well, this is exactly what's happening right now with our colleagues who are being detained and arrested for absolutely nothing. But yeah, during that press conference the next morning, which, I mean, I think it went really well. A lot of journalists showed up online and in person. But during that press conference, 2 Chinese men, unidentified men, came in the room looking for us. And they were not on our list of like registered journalists. And right after the press conference, they also tried to look for me and Pema. And we were just literally hiding in the bathroom, because our colleague of ours was saying, you have to stay there because they're looking for you. And, they were also just in the lobby waiting. 2 of our colleagues who left the press conference to their hotel were also derouted from their taxi, and they were taken to police station. So all of this happened in Athens, which was honestly shocking. But at the same time, the silver lining is that we made the headlines. So I guess, it wasn't too bad.
More to those headlines. So the question of the disrupting the torch lighting, which really was an incredible achievement, and not something that, I want to do a whole podcast with the SFT crew, Students for a Free Tibet team, because they've pulled off so many amazing actions this time around, as usual. And but where were you when the torch lighting happened, and were you surprised, thrilled when you heard the news that the Chimilamo and the other activists had actually successfully appeared out of the woods? And while the torch was being lit, suddenly Chimi's voice boomed into the middle of the ceremony and said, what did she say? How is it that Beijing Olympics can happen how
can you let Beijing 2022 host the games when they're carrying out a genocide, I think, in East Turkestan,
against the Uyghurs,
along the lines. Yeah.
It was amazing to hear her voice, to see them. So if you watch the footage, you see these women dressed in their kind of Greek robes, doing the theatrical lighting, with all the light twinkling, the music in the background, and then you just hear this booming voice of Chimilamo over the top,
clear as can be.
And it takes you back. You kind of go, wow, can you actually hear her? It's so
in
amazing.
The official video, which is incredible.
Right. It's so amazing. It reminds me of that time when I think it was Hu Jintao was at was it in DC at the White House, and you could hear the protesters all the way down where they've been cordoned off, but they were shouting so loudly. We know that Hu Jintao could hear their voices at the White House. It's that type of protesting is so amazing. It's so worthwhile and gives everyone such a sense of we've achieved something. We made the Chinese leaders hear our voices when Tibetans and Uyghurs and Hong Kongers are silenced somewhere else, and they can hear us now. And it's, as activists, it's such an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and they also, showed up with banners, which was like no genocide games, which was all captured by media. And you could, in the official video of that ceremony, you could see security running like immediately, which is just so funny to watch as well.
Well, and it's also precious, right? I mean, the voice of the announcer and these, women doing this role play. I mean, it's all a bit ridiculous as far as I'm concerned, but just the, it's such a fantastic disruption of all of that. And that's what I feel like these games are just kind of sadly, just a joke now. And certainly China's Olympics are, and it's all just a, facade, put all of this, the values and all the things they talk about, the spirit and everything. It just feels so empty and so bankrupt. But that moment, that action, and Chimin Lamo and that voice, her presence just changes everything. It's especially good because it's also precious, and it's just such with the theatrics and the hushed tone of the announcer, the flame is being lit. And then just really, I feel like
free Tibet!
Free Turkestan!
It couldn't be better, really, the juxtaposition of these two forces. And really, these moments, I mean, why do they matter from a direct action campaign standpoint? Why, we know they obviously feel good for all of us who are trying to make our voices heard, and the voices of Tibetans and Uyghurs and others heard. But, why do these moments matter just in a bigger sense and towards our objectives? What would you say?
I think it was important for us to use this opportunity to shine the light on the human rights atrocities that are happening all across China and its occupied territories, and to focus less, to make these games less about the actual games, and make it more about the human rights issues, which I think to some extent we've really managed to do, because, I was also talking to journalists earlier, like, they were asking me if I deem this campaign to be successful, and I think I do, because when you Google Beijing Olympics, I think the first things that's going to come up is articles about our campaign. So I think that's pretty great, that we've managed to reach out to different audiences, because one thing that, we know, which is true, is that we are kind of in the human rights bubble, in the human rights world, where we assume that a lot of people know about these things and about China specifically and the different abuses they're carrying out. But when you step outside of the human rights world, you realize that actually, not a lot of people are familiar with who the Uyghurs are or who the Tibetans are, and what's happening in Hong Kong. So I think with this campaign, what we've managed to do is really also go beyond the usual audience that we have. We've targeted the sport audience, the sports fan, the athletes, the broadcasters, the corporate sector, and even though like the corporate sponsors have refused to basically engage with us, they heard our pleas. They've received our letters, they heard about our campaign in the news. It did not go unnoticed. So I feel like we've really managed to target different audiences, and that's why now athletes are starting to speak up. They're even in looking to boycott the opening ceremony, which I don't think would have happened without this campaign. So yeah.
Mandy, anything to add in terms of what the campaign has achieved, or even though the games are going ahead?
Oh, I mean, I think it's achieved so much. I mean, like Zamrata was just saying, it's gained us columns and columns of inches of news reports and articles, which, are a really good way for us to attempt to weaken China's propaganda arm. Their propaganda arm is so strong. They have spent an absolute fortune trying to buy influencers, so influencers on TikTok, on Twitter, on all social media platforms, to be writing stuff which is the entire lies about the situation in Tibet and the situation in East Turkestan. And so us doing these direct actions enables us to kind of get the truth out there and get the real messages out there that there isn't happiness with people. Uyghurs aren't singing and dancing like they are in China's propaganda videos. Tibetans aren't kind of wandering around, worshipping Xi Jinping as their kind of spiritual leader. They want a photo of His Holiness, so it enables us to kind of get across the real messages and what Tibetans and Uyghurs and Hong Kongers are really thinking. I think that's kind of one kind of major success of this recent campaign. But I just want to turn to another kind of massive applause raising moment for us in the campaign, which is when the boycott announcements started coming out. And I mean, I sit at my computer an awful lot, way more than is healthy for anybody. But the moment when I was told about 30 seconds before the announcement came out that Biden was about to announce that the US were boycotting Beijing 2022, I mean, it was just a moment of absolute, we've done it! It was just hugely, hugely elating, and knowing that we'd worked so hard for this, because it means something for the US not to go, really, really means something, and for the UK to not go, and for Canada to not go, and for them to say they're not going because of the human rights situation, because of what's happening to the Uyghurs, because of what's happening in Tibet, because of Hong Kong. It means so much, not just to us as campaigners, but Tibetans inside Tibet. They will have got that message. They will know that they have done that, and we will know that eventually how Tibetans feel about that moment and what the US and the UK and Canada and everybody else has done. But also, it really matters because Xi Jinping and China, the Beijing kind of army, will be absolutely furious that we have thrown water onto their party and kind of made people go, Biden's not going. Why is that? Why are the US boycotting and questioning and finding out, the truth of what's really happening? And, for me and for us, that's kind of an incredible success of this campaign.
I've been saying it's the bare minimum that governments can do at this point, considering there is a genocide and crimes against humanity happening. But at the same time, and, I know there has been criticism that the diplomatic boycotts in the end are just sort of a hollow tokenism. But really, we know that this matters to the Chinese government, that they wanted, like in 2008, all of the world's leaders sitting there side by side and giving them, applauding for them. They've got a lineup that is really authoritarians and dictators, and the UN Secretary General. That's another story. Absolutely pathetic that he is going, as well as Tedros, the head of the WHO. I think it says a lot about where those two sit in China's pockets. But it is noted by everyone who will watch, and certainly by China and Chinese nationalists and themselves, that this is not going to plan. They got the games. We wanted to stop them completely. But those forces and the money involved is so much stronger and more powerful than I think people can even imagine. And so I feel like the diplomatic boycotts, while I have been a bit, I'm just annoyed and disappointed that this opportunity to hold China accountable wasn't, more firmly seized upon by everyone. But then it's also not surprising, and this is an incredible achievement. It really is. And if it wasn't for the activists, the No Beijing 2022 coalition, the efforts of you guys and everyone who pushed for this, who knows what would have happened? Who knows how? I don't. The key with all of this is that we have to demand the moon, right? We have to push for the strongest, the most that we think is, not possible, but that we think is deserved, that should be in this moment. And then, we work our hardest and see where hopefully employ good strategy and good sequencing of tactics. And hopefully we get somewhere close to what we wanted. And I feel like for you both at this point, I mean, game's open tomorrow. We won't be watching. But what do you think is going to happen? How do you feel about athletes and potential for protest, or I don't know, anything?
So I would find it really difficult to think that there wouldn't be anything from them, even at press conferences when they would be asked like direct questions from journalists about these issues. And also, I feel like, if they fear to speak up on these issues, it's almost like you're feeding into the vicious cycle, because that's exactly what China wants. So at some point, we have to break that cycle of agreeing to whatever China wants and fearing to do something because of reprisals, retaliation, and the consequences. But I feel like we have to own up to what we say, what we do, and athletes need to be more brave because a lot of people are looking up to them. They are, influencers in some ways. They are really a lot of people look up to them. So it's almost like a waste if they don't use that opportunity to stand up for human rights.
Yeah, and I feel like it's only them now. There's no one else. Everyone else has either failed us, like the sponsors or the various sporting associations, except I would say Team GB, wow, saying that they will completely support their athletes and their free expression and whatever. I mean, it's remarkable. They just put out a statement. So that is incredible. But I feel like, it's just them now. Tibetans are locked down in Tibet. Chinese citizens, those protest pens or whatever was there in 2008, that was all a bit of a joke. But Chinese citizens, courageous Chinese citizens, did sign up and register to hold protests at that time. And of course, they were not treated well in the end. It was all a facade, or, it was just for show. But certainly there are no protest pens this time. And the athletes are all we've got to do or say something. And so we will wait. We won't be watching. We will be waiting to hear what's going on.
We will be waiting to hear. And, we have great relationships with journalists and the media. And, as you two know, they have been calling and writing and urging for us to speak to them over the course of the last few weeks, and that's really escalated ahead of them going. We know that they're going to be asking athletes about what they think about the situation, and we know that they will feed back to us any information that they think's going on, because they will want to know what we think about it. So we are very grateful to our wonderful free media, despite the fact that they themselves are not going to have much freedom when they're there. That they're locked in the bubble. They can't go to Tibet. They can't, they can't even wander around Beijing to go and try and speak to, Wosei, the Tibetan blogger who's there, or any of the other, Chinese activists who are outspoken in Beijing. They're all locked away. They've had their social media accounts all taken down, and they're under lockdown. So even if journalists were allowed to get out, they wouldn't be able to actually even speak to them. So we're really grateful for them, that they at least have a lifeline to us, and we can pass on information to them, and we'll be speaking to them whilst they're there.
Well, here we go. Onwards to the Genocide Games. The I Will Not Watch campaign will be rolling. Mandy, you said 5,000 people have signed up to watch the alternative opening ceremonies, or have signed up to not watch the games at this point?
So far, we have at least 5,000 who have pledged to not watch the games. That's a really significant amount of supporters who have said, no, I'm really not interested in that.
Taking the step to sign up for it.
They're taking the step to sign up. And they're not the ones who are just posting the I Will Not Want hashtag on Twitter, which is, when you look, it's kind of all over the place. So there are more than those people who will not be watching. It's been a real treat to actually see people showing that they are really unhappy about this, and they're not even going to watch their teams.
Good things in a terrible situation, and incredible solidarity between our groups. And thanks to Xi Jinping and the Chinese government for providing us all this opportunity to strengthen our ties, work together, hone our skills and our networks and relationships, and we're not going to stop. Look forward to working together, post. I think everyone is looking forward to working together post Beijing Olympics. Make it end, and let's go kick the Chinese government's butt.
And we will do that, because we are a force to be reckoned with now. We're a really strong combined movement, and we're going places.
Yeah, it's also one of the best things that came out of this campaign as well.
Definitely.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for talking with me on this Tibet Unlocked podcast number 2.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, really.